All right, lovely. Let's get started. Everyone, welcome to what promises to be a really exciting conversation about the art and science of retaining customers. So we're going to start our conversation today with Abhiraj, who's the co-founder and CEO at Urban Company. And before we get into that, and I'm going to ask Abhiraj some interesting questions in a few minutes. But before we get into that, let me quickly explain what today's session is about. First, we're going to have a conversation with Abhiraj, who is going to hopefully reveal some inside secrets about delivering experience in probably one of the hardest categories this country has ever seen, which is services inside your home. So we're going to hear some secrets from Abhiraj on that, and also his reflections in building the business about why it matters so much to worry about customer love and customer retention. So that's the first part of the conversation with Abhiraj and his first-hand experience in building UC. Then we're going to spend half an hour to reflect a little bit on the underlying methods and techniques that are used as you scale a company that we as the X210X team will take you through in terms of what is NPS? Does it really help? Can you use it to diagnose where you are in your customer experience journey? And then as dessert for today's conversation, we're going to have Abhay, who's a co-founder at Licious, who's going to tell us about their own journey of passion in achieving customer love and the hard work of continuing to work at it over the years. So that's today's conversation in three parts. Chat with Abhiraj, the UC journey, a little bit about the tools and techniques from X210X, and then wrap up with Abhay telling us stories from the Licious journey. Welcome again. Abhiraj, thanks again for doing this. Let me just start with an easy question, Abhiraj, just to warm you up, and then I'm going to ask you some of the inside secrets at UC. Tell us a little bit about your own evolution as a company and what it even meant to try and build customer experience in something as hard as services at home.
Thanks, Saiki, for having me. Our evolution has been an interesting one. We started about 9 years back, and when we started, the space was extremely unorganized, fragmented, continues to be that way. And we actually started with the view that technology was enough to organize home services. So our first avatar back in 2015 was an asset-light, tech-only platform that did not want to get its hands dirty. I would say the simple one-line sort of summary of our 8-year journey has been because of getting our hands dirtier and dirtier and dirtier. So every time we've, first dipped a little bit of our fingers and realized it wasn't enough, then all of our fingers, then our entire fist and half of our. And I think mostly, reluctant not to fully jump into the mud pool, but eventually realizing that there's no other way out. As a tough business, and the consumer best part, as Bezos might say, is the consumer expectation just keeps getting higher and higher. So the fact that a plumber or a cleaner or a beautician shows up on time is no longer amazing. Consumers want them to show up in 30 minutes. Consumers want a flawless experience. They want the same person to come back again and again for them. And that's great, right? I mean, it's amazing that consumer expectations are ever evolving, because that's what gets us to run to office every day. We are very, very far away from what I would even call reliable experiences at home. Love is a much higher order emotion that I don't think our consumers feel for us right now. But to even get to reliability, where 95 out of 100 times or 97 out of 100 times we don't make any mistakes. I think we're quite far away from that. So I think we've gotten to a point. Our evolution from here on is about trying to be much more reliable and hopefully keep weaving in love along with that reliability.
And you've used some interesting words, Abhiraj. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. You've used the word reliability, you've used the word love. And I know you're in many categories. Can you share some examples of categories where you think you've got closer to what you're calling love and what you had to do to get there. Let's start there and let's come back to the challenges you're trying to solve on the reliability front. But any categories where you're closer to love and what it took to get there?
Yeah. So let me actually maybe spend a minute to define what I mean by these terms. So
yes,
when I say reliable, I mean that we do what we promise, and we do it every single time. Which means if you promise the consumer that you will show up all the time. If you promise the consumer that you will show up at a certain time, you show up at that time. If you promise a consumer a certain deliverable, that is delivered. It's as simple as that. Right? So I think reliability is a function of operational excellence. It is a function of having systems and processes that work. And it is also a function of under promising and over delivering, because you are starting with a promise. So many of us as companies in the need to acquire consumers fast will often over promise and under deliver.
Correct.
So fundamentally, what are you being held accountable for? What is reliability? It is the promise you're making to the consumer. So that, I think, is reliability. Reliability is hygiene, but it is not enough. I might be a very reliable spouse, but that doesn't mean that my spouse will love me. Because I have to go beyond being reliable. I have to go beyond paying the bills, and being available, and so on and so forth. So reliability is the absence of errors. Love is when you go above and beyond to delight me. Love is when I look forward to interacting with you as a brand. Simply put, right? When I enjoy that process, when it is not a chore, it is something that every time I experience you, it puts me in a happy zone.
But this is a nice separation, Abhiraj, and both sides matter a lot. The reliability, which is the absence of errors in the promise you've made, and love, which is kind of going above and beyond, where a customer will look forward to an interaction. And examples of this from
love without reliability would be a very bad cocktail, right? That would be the very nice infatuation that you had one summer but never translated to marriage. So I think, let me give some examples. So I think in one of our categories, massage at home, I think we've been able to probably get both right. And part of the reason is we didn't start by just saying that, hey, look, we'll give a above average experience for your massage at home. We said, look, this is a category where consumers want to relax, they want to feel good. Consequently, we got to get everything right. We got to go with foldable beds, with the right set of oils, music, the whole paraphernalia. Some of this now, for consumers who've experienced it, appears par for the course. But when we were doing it, I remember it was not intuitive to me as well. And we were talking about this earlier in the day, where the category leader was very, very vehement, saying, no, I want each and every one of these things to be there. And, as a founder, I was like, how does it matter? Just let's just deliver the massage service in the consumer's bed, right? All consumers have beds. Why do we have to carry beds? I think going above and beyond to delight the user. We've seen whenever there is the marriage of love with very high reliability. So the consumer can rely upon you every single time. And also the experience is so delightful that they look forward. I think that's the ultimate combination of the two. We struggle with one or the other across categories. We have categories which have very high reliability, but don't really have any love going for them. We have categories where the experience very often is amazingly brilliant, but it's not as reliable. That's kind of our journey of marrying the two and bringing all our categories to a certain benchmark for where we are today.
Got it. And given you're in so many different categories, Abhiraj, what do you do personally? What's this journey been like? I mean, obviously, I'm sure when you start...
We started with the art and science of retaining customers.
Yes.
It's probably like, I think the entirety of my answer is actually captured there. The science of retaining customers is the reliability. And the art of retaining customers is the love.
Nice.
And if you get the two together, then you've basically won over the consumer. The consumer will stay with you, keep coming back, and you will also expand the wallet share, because they will look forward to transacting with you more and more, because it gives them happiness. Therefore, they will happily part with their rupees on your platform. If you just have the science, you will have the consumers who keep coming back, but you will not be able to grow the wallet share from them. because they are coming back to you often because it's good, it works. There's no absence. I mean, there's no other alternative. Very often, there's a risk of them switching over as well in that situation.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes. So as consumers, we can intuitively identify, Abhiraj, with what you've talked about. The massage is a wow experience. Firstly, it's unbelievable that you would even think of transporting a bed around. I'm sure the economics on that are not easy.
Yeah.
So there is wow to even the attempt that is made at delivering something so beautifully standardized. But talk to us a little bit about the machine behind what we see as consumers. So what goes on inside the UC garage, if you will, that allows you to continuously think of what is relevant, measure if it's working or not, and then keep getting better over time? Can you give us a peek into what happens behind the scenes in some of these categories?
Yeah. So I think every category for us has a independent and fairly empowered category team, category management team. The category management team will have certain basic BAU pillars to it. These BAU pillars will be an entire training infrastructure to ensure that every professional is trained as per our SOPs. An infrastructure for a supply chain of products, tools, chemicals, etc., that will be used in the category so that all the service professionals are following our products, our tooling, our SOPs. It will have support from product and marketing teams to think about what is relevant for users and so on and so forth. There'll be certain basic frameworks and basic pillars that every category team will be empowered with for BAU.
Got it.
But the category team is for us a growth team, not so much a maintenance and continuity team. Their core job is to run the business, but most importantly, grow it, which means to think about all dimensions of availability, fulfillment, selection and assortment, and pricing and service experience, all of this put together, and how do we get further and further growth. And they are fully empowered to take decisions and do multiple micro experiments to see what works and what doesn't work. Our business is run in a micro market. There is no city level business and there is no national level business. So I'll give you a recent example of our electricians, plumbers, and carpenters category. This category, we were thinking deeply about how do we grow it, and this category will have its own training infra, it will have its own supply chain infra, etc., etc.
Correct.
But the job to be done for the category team entering into 2023 was to figure out how do we grow, how do we accelerate the growth of this category. And the hypothesis that they had was that electricians, plumbers, and carpenters often is operating in a limited vicinity.
Correct.
In a small hyperlocal area, let's say in your apartment complex, you will call the electrician or plumber who's stationed there. Therefore, if we have to be competitive with the local electrician and the local carpenter, the first thing we have to crash is SLA. And our SLA cannot be 2 hours or 3 hours or same day or next day. The language of the SLA has to be minutes, not hours.
Absolutely.
So it has to be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maximum 40 minutes. What helped in our business is when you have to do such a thing, you don't have to do it at a national level or even a city level. You can literally pick up a micro market which will have 10 electricians. Tell all of them that, look, for the next 3 months, I'm just going to pay you a small amount of extra money. Just tango with me and run the pilot and see if it actually moves the needle for the consumer. If it moves the needle for the consumer, then you can figure out how to deliver it. Often the biggest challenge is either you don't know what will move the needle for the consumer, or too early in the journey, you will start worrying about supply constraints and how will I scale it and is this even possible?
Yeah.
So we try to remove that by going into a very small area and just initially not worrying about the supply side challenges. Just figuring out, does it move the needle for the consumer or not?
Understood.
Interestingly, when we did this pilot, we realized that it actually jumped growth and conversion by more than 50%. And so now we are in the phase where we are figuring out, okay, how do you scale it? How do you scale it profitably? Is it even possible, etc.?
Correct.
I have found this to be a much simpler answer to me to solve for than actually figuring out what actually moves the needle for the consumer.
Yeah. So it's very interesting
of that category team at any point in time is to find that one thing, that one kernel, that one insight that is going to move the needle for the consumer from where the category exists at today.
Understood. It's very interesting to hear you share that example, Abhiraj, because the way you're speaking the experience design is synonymous with category growth. So it's almost like if I ask you the question, why is customer experience important? You may even struggle to answer the question because, hey, that's my business, is kind of what you've been saying for the
Yes.
past 15 minutes.
Yes.
But I do want to ask you a different sort of question. Before I ask that question to Abhiraj, just a quick shout out to the audience. If you'd like to ask questions based on what Abhiraj is saying, or you're a UC customer, you have something to say, put it on the chat box. And if we can have a few minutes at the end, we'll try and share some of that with Abhiraj and ask us some of your questions. So please log some of your questions on chat and we'll try to spend a few minutes on that before we let Abhiraj go. But I want to ask you a question a little bit on the business side of the equation, Abhiraj, which is this whole topic of customer retention. I mean, you're the only game in town, right? Maybe you don't feel that way, but I know you don't feel that way. But as you see, when all of us think about services at home, frankly, many of us just default to UC. And that's not a luxury many other consumer tech founders have, frankly. Everyone has three competitors breathing down their neck. But
so do we.
Why is this this whole notion of customer retention, share of wallet, delivering the wow experience, art versus science, reliability versus love? You've already hit us with 5 things that talk about your obsession with this. Why is it so important from a business standpoint?
Good question. And what I might say next may be slightly controversial. See, the brutal reality of India is that we have maybe 10, 15, maximum 20 million households which are profitable to serve for pretty much any category. Spread about home services. Number of households in India which earn more than 20 lakhs per annum is hardly 10 to 12 million. And 20 lakhs per annum is not a lot of money, by the way. And I would encourage our listeners to actually spend time in households where household income is 20, 15 or 10 lakhs per annum. You realize that there's actually not a lot to go around. And that number caps out at 1.2 CR, 12 million. And even if I was to extend this to 10 lakhs per annum or more, that number doesn't go beyond 25 to 30 million households. And then once you start taking the cut of cities and so on and so forth, the number keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So we only have those many consumers. India will grow. It will become a large economy over the next 10, 15, 20 years. And hopefully this number will become very, very large.
Correct.
But today what we have to contend with is a market where you have only those many consumers, only those many households. And consequently, the Pareto in every category is very, very lopsided. And so you don't have the luxury of not satisfying some users and enough market out there.
You don't have infinite runway.
Yeah, to keep acquiring and figuring your game out. Very quickly, the growth in any category will index towards retention and wallet share improvement versus just new user acquisition. And if you're a very fast growing company, you might hit that curve in 3, 4, 5 years. If you're a moderate growing company, you might hit that curve in 7, 8, 10 years. But I mean, I know no company that survives beyond 8 to 10 years and has done very well, which doesn't come to this deep realization that we do not have many more new users to go and acquire. We just have to really, really delight all the users we have on the platform. There'll be some, healthy rate of new user addition that will keep happening. But if I want to become super profitable and if I want to become super relevant to my user base, I need to have an experience today that is unmatched, that they love, and they just keep compounding on the platform.
That's very well said. At some level, the only way to build a profitable franchise is if you have mastered the equation of delighting and retaining your customers. There is no other way. And you're already knocking on that threshold of scale, Abhiraj, where you've served millions of customers. And at some level, this is a truth you've discovered in the reality of it as opposed to in theory, right?
Correct.
And this
we already hit that mark.
So talk to us a bit about.
It will be significantly a function of like continuing to delight our existing users rather than going out there and acquiring lots of new users in the hopes.
So just maybe explain for a minute how this interaction between what you're talking about on customer experience and love with the growth and profitability equation. In what way do you connect these two as a CEO?
So growth is very easy to understand that if, in the early years, you might, if you're growing at the back of new user acquisition, you will have maybe 30, 40, 50% of your business in that year coming from new users. At some point, if your engine is actually working and you have reasonably decent retention, you will tip over to 80, 85, 90% of your business coming from repeat users. And only 10, 15% of the business in that year coming from new users. Now, no matter how much you accelerate new users, you're not going to grow dramatically that year unless you get more from your existing users. So if your existing users if their spends have flatlined on your platform, or worse, it is deteriorating, you will have a very, very serious growth challenge, because your new user funnel will never be able to make up for it.
Correct.
Why is it related to profitability? Well, CACs are only growing in India. I have actually never really seen CAC dramatically come down for any platform. It can stabilize, you can see some leverage, but the reality is that consumers will have more and more choice. Privacy will keep creeping up across platforms, and consequently it will only get more and more expensive to acquire. Consumers through advertising. Consequently, your best bet is to get as many repeat users into your funnel as possible, because you don't pay to acquire repeat users. Hopefully they're repeating on their own. And if the experience is good, then that word of mouth will keep on attracting more new users for you. Also, word of mouth is one of the few truly scalable ways of, so as you scale as a platform, all other channels of acquisition are your foes. So if you depended on Facebook and you have scaled 2x, now you need to spend 2x more on Facebook to get the same number of users. The only acquisition channel that is your friend with scale is word of mouth. Because if you have a certain word of mouth engine going, let's say for every 4 users you acquire, you get one word of mouth going, which gets you one new user. That scales beautifully with your platform growth. So word of mouth is actually the only growth engine.
Compounding is the only compounding source
that scales, and scales beautifully without you having to pay for everything else. Scale is your foe.
Lovely. So the way you explain it, Abhiraj, that 50-50 switching to 80-20, 90-10 in favor of repeat users, and the profit equation compounding only if you retain, not if you have to keep spending on acquisition. Basically, it's an inescapable, almost law of gravity, that as you get to a even early scale, you've got to crack the reliability and love piece. Now, maybe that's a good segue to talk a little bit about your forward-looking journey. Obviously, I know you personally, so I know for you, the restlessness never goes away. You still think, boss, we have so much more to do. So how are you using things like Relationship NPS to know where you stand vis-a-vis customers, and to keep pushing the envelope on just raising the game with the customers you have and getting to that customer love?
Yeah, I think it's a good one. So, and somebody asked this question as to how do you measure, reliability, and how do you measure love in the chat. And for me, I think had mastered the measurement of transactional NPS with all kinds of cuts to it. Every person who joins UC probably gets baptized in how to measure transactional NPS. People, will come back and say, I did these 3 interventions and we have seen an improvement of 3 percentage points, etc., etc. So I think the science of this is to measure sort of transactional level data, whether it's CSAT, NPS, ratings, and generally speaking, I feel like NPS is the best measure. I think the love and the art of it, I think, can get measured through Relationship NPS, because what Relationship NPS requires the consumer to do is to zoom out, not look at a particular transaction or a particular point in time, but look at a longer period of time. Say, what is your relationship with this brand? And then across a series of parameters, the consumer takes a holistic view of how do they think about this brand. It is no different from, if I was to sort of ask my wife, hey, how was I today? Walk? She might have a very pointed view. And I can also change myself, right, for just that limited period. But if I ask her, hey, how has our marriage been over the last 10 years? She might have a very difficult. So I think the relationship NPS should, measured point in time allows you to see how, what at a more relationship equity level, where are you vis-a-vis the consumer? Are they
Yeah.
trusting you? Are they relying upon you? Is there that consumer love? And it's actually very actionable, because it's not just an overarching question. It has 10, 12 questions underneath, and it allows you to see if there is any superpower that you have, uh, where are you subpar,
Hmm.
uh, and sometimes you realize that, hey, I'm just actually average across everything, so I need to develop a superpower.
Got it. I very well put. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of relationship NPS, as you know, Abhiraj, but you've given me a new vocabulary in the last 2 minutes. The quality of the marriage,
Yeah,
not what I did this morning. I think is a lovely way of putting it. And also the zoom out. I love that phrase as well. The zoom out for the customer, giving you feedback at the overall platform level is how does our relation. I think
correct.
both those are very powerful terms. I'm going to try and capture a couple of questions. I think you already answered Rachit's question, Abhiraj, on this reliability versus love piece, and relationship NPS starts taking you into that love type territory. Lots of questions around how do you manage the challenge of disintermediation on the platform. And it's very interesting. There's a love on the other side of the platform as well, that obviously you've thought about a lot. Any reflections on that, Abhiraj? How have you solved for this, getting the direct number and going outside UC?
It's a tough one, honestly. I think we haven't fully cracked it. Our philosophy has been, to constantly look for new value-added levers on both sides of the platform to go through the platform. And we do a bunch of stuff on the supply side in terms of career pathing for them, insurances, access to credit, etc. Consumer side, our loyalty program UC Plus has worked very well. We are in the works of improving availability, making sure that we are more on demand rather than scheduled. And we've seen that to work very well. I think it still is, I would say, a reasonably important problem for us to solve. I think there is probably one of the big reasons for leakage, and we could have grown much faster if we would have fully plugged it. But philosophically, we don't want to do it by preventing the two sides from, because in India you can't do that, right? And people always figure out loopholes. So you have to sort of give them reasons to go through the platform.
Correct. Reason to stay as opposed to punishment for leaving.
Absolutely.
Understood. That's a nice way of putting it, Abhiraj. So there are a couple more questions I'm going to try and quickly pick up. One from Mansi, who says, do you need this love delight experience always, Abhiraj? Or do you think that over time, reliability itself can be the factor that drives love? Interesting.
So I think that over time reliability itself can be the factor that drives love. The bar is, of course, you have to be very, 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 very reliable. And I think one company that comes to mind is Amazon. Amazon is extremely reliable on every dimension of customer service. And there's probably no unique dimension where people would say, hey, this is like one particular area where Amazon sort of is in the love territory, and yet the overall experience is what users love. And I've seen repeatedly users say that they love Amazon. And when you ask why, it is branded under an overall umbrella of just customer service, and customer service excellence, which is across all touch points, whether it's their next day delivery, their customer support, their assortment, their pricing, all of it put together. So I think standalone it can. The one company that definitely comes to mind that doing that is Apple.
And I guess what you're saying is that reliability is a path to love, but there's no question of love without reliability.
Zero questions, love without reliability.
So that's one final question that let's take from Sandeep. Abhiraj, is how do you get category improvement? How do you make it relentless, quarter after quarter, year after year? What are some of the things you do to make sure every category is getting better every year?
So I think we have to for each category, I think you don't want more every year. You don't want more than a couple of jobs to be done. So you want to be very, very sharp about what the category roadmap is for that particular year. And you want maybe one or two things that the category leader is obsessing about. And those one or two things that will take the category roadmap to the next level have to come from a deep user insight. It has to be something that you have heard users, talk about, heard users say. So it's a pain point that the users are feeling. And then you have articulated that pain point at some level, or that insight at some level, as a broad construct for the category team to go and explore.
To go and figure out, yeah.
So it is a growth hypothesis. And you don't want, that, okay, if we were to sort of figure this out in this rough territory, then, we can grow. The figuring out has to be left to the category team, because otherwise it's not possible. And it will almost always, in my experience, require multiple iterations and multiple cracks at the goal. So, something won't work in the first pilot, then you try something else that may work, that may not work. And by the way, when it's done in hindsight, it'll seem extremely intuitive, which is the beauty of it, right? And we had the tasting experience of Licious. I won't spill the beans on what Abhay might share, but as I sat for this session, I was just thinking, in hindsight, it's so obvious, right? Like, for a company that sells, some shape and form food, like, taste is it has to taste. So the beauty of any of this is, in hindsight, when you tell somebody that, hey, this is what we discovered, after a while they'll be like, oh, this is like so obvious, man, like you could have just asked me. But it's never that obvious in first.
No, exactly. The biggest insights are always obvious in hindsight.
Very obvious in hindsight.
It's common sense. That's a good note on which to maybe wrap up the conversation. I know, Abhiraj, we're going to get a lot of feedback in the feedback form at the end of today's session that, are you kidding me? Just 30 minutes with Abhiraj. What were you guys thinking? This should have been at least 2 hours in terms of conversation, but let me try and
I don't think I can go on for 2 hours. I don't have that. All my gyan has been sucked out by you.
Yeah, sure. I now I know that's not true, Abhiraj, but a few things, I'm going to play a few phrases back to you that you've shared with us today. One is the notion of reliability, and as Mansi put it so nicely, reliability itself is a path to love when experiences are so broken in so many categories, but also constantly thinking about the love equation in every category. I think it was a powerful place to start. The hard reality of the consumer market in India is that after 10 million households, the reality of affordability changes. So as a business, as you scale, you haven't learned to master the retention and delight of those users, and you haven't got to 80-20, 90-10 in favor of repeats, they're going to face a fundamental growth and profitability challenge. That was the second message that you shared with us. And third is this ability to zoom out. This one is going to be, I'm going to talk about this at home with my wife. The relationship NPS tool is marriage, not what I did this morning. And having an ability to zoom out and understand the customer relationship with the platform is a fundamental way to keep pushing yourself on what matters. I think all of these so powerful, so much else you said, Abhiraj, but these are things that are sort of resonating top of mind for me from all you shared. Again, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And be prepared for a booking request for a follow-up conversation on the 40 questions that we've not been able to ask you, Abhiraj. But for now, I'll let you go, and thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Seth. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Take care. All right, folks, you guys don't go away, because we still have a lot coming in today's session. So we're going to pick up a little bit where Abhiraj left off on what is this relationship NPS as a company, the so-called metric that measures your marriage with customers. We're going to double click a little bit more on that in the next 15-20 minutes, and maybe also answer some questions on that. And then to wrap up today's session, in the last half an hour, we're going to have Abhay join us. It's actually an interesting coincidence that Abhiraj shared this experience he's had with Licious about how much they put into their product. But we're going to have Abhay join us and tell us firsthand where that comes from. So that's still to come. So please, no one go. Plenty to come in today's conversation. So we're going to switch into part 2, which is what is this relationship NPS tool? How can you use it as founders and leaders of other startups in the ecosystem as a really powerful force multiplying tool? Because as Abhiraj said, if you can't retain those 90% of customers, you can't build a profitable business, as simple as that. So for that, I'm going to share my screen and take us through a little bit the tools and tactics of relationship NPS and what it looks like. Again, as we go through this, if you guys have questions, I want to log comments, please do that via the Q&A channel as you've been doing already. Okay. So we'll start with, do we have, Dipro, you're with us?
Yes,
wonderful. I'll welcome my friend and colleague, Dipronil, who's with the customer experience team at X210X, who's made a bit of a life passion around unraveling this tool of relationship NPS and understanding it for different companies, different categories. So Dipro is going to take us through some of the magic there. But this page that you're looking at, I think, is a survey that many of you have actually taken. Those of you who have signed up for today's session have actually answered a simple questionnaire around how you rate your experience with the e-commerce company that you buy from. And Dipronil, I think you're going to show us the magic of how that translates into a relationship NPS diagnosis of what that company needs to work on, right?
Yes, Saiki. That's right.
Okay, that's a tall ask, Dipro. So let's see how we're going to do that. So these are the questions that we've asked folks. Should we move on from here, Dipro, and you want to jump into sharing the report with us?
Yes, Saiki, sure.
Okay.
So we won't name the company, Saiki, but the most preferred option, let's say that was company A. We've got company A's got a very healthy score of 41 over here in terms of NPS. And that was kind of expected considering that this is the most preferred option. But in spite of them having an NPS of 41, there's a very good scope of improvement that you can see over here. And the reason I say that is if you look at the distribution of the responses over here, you'll see that the detractors are less than 10%. And there's a major share of customers falling into that passive bucket, which is basically customers who have rated them on a 7, 8 on a scale. And I think this is exactly what even Abhiraj was talking about, of that difference between reliability and love, right? So this is those customers who are falling into that reliability bucket. This company basically reliably delivering customer experience, but they're not having or creating a lot of delighter opportunities. And that's something that they can definitely work on.
Got it. So interesting. They have only 6% detractors, gives them a decent relationship NPS of 41, but still a huge opportunity on the passive side of the equation, Dipro. Okay. Are you ready to go 10 levels deeper, Dipro?
Sure.
This was just a warm-up slide. Let's talk about what sits behind this. So what's this page we're looking at now, and what's the story it tells us?
Sure. So Saiki, in the last page that you saw, a lot of companies that we've worked with or a lot of startups in the ecosystem, they typically stop over there, right? So they do a feedback survey, they understand what is their NPS score looking like, and then they scramble to understand what exactly is driving that NPS, right? So some of them get some signals from, say, the customer support data. Some of them maybe are doing some market research to understand social media sentiments in understanding, okay, what's playing exactly in driving the CX for us or driving our NPS, right? But there is actually a much more reliable data science approach that can be followed in deriving what drives your NPS. And this is what we call as the key driver analysis, right? What we did is the survey responses that we collected on the survey that we've shared with the participants, we ran that through a machine learning based multivariate regression model. And that helped us give this key driver analysis, right? This key driver analysis basically tells us, it helps us quantitatively identify what are those most important CX drivers that influence your NPS, right? So I'll just take a minute to probably explain this chart. On the y-axis, what you can see is the influence on NPS. So it basically talks about how much does how much does each of these CX drivers actually influence NPS.
What's their weight? What's their weightage in the NPS? I know I've had the same challenge, which is, okay, I know my NPS is 40. Now there are 20 different things I do in my business. Now, how do I get that 40 to 50? So what you're saying is these factors, each of these factors has a different weightage in how they add up to overall NPS for customers.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. So the typical way to read this is on the y-axis, you had that influence. X-axis has all those drivers that we had put on the survey. And the row that you see below, Saiki, that's the customer satisfaction score for each of these drivers, right? So what that means is, how is the performance of each of these interaction points, or how satisfied are each of these customers on those interaction points, right? So typical way to read this is, say for company A, selection and availability comes across as the most important driver, which has a 23% influence on their NPS. But the customer satisfaction score on that is around 75%, which is good, but it can improve significantly. And this is exactly what we had seen in the last slide as well, where you're seeing a major share of the customers fall into that passive bucket, right? And hence you're seeing that top 3 out of the top 4 drivers over here have a very average CSAT rating, which can be
interesting. So you made it very tangible. I was wondering a little bit what this rainbow is at the bottom of the page, Dipro. So what basically you're saying is the height of the columns is the importance of the factor in the NPS. So in this company's case, the top 4 factors add up to, what do they add up to? 23, 40, 55,
around 70%.
Almost 70% of the NPS is explained by 4 factors. So simple, that helps. I at least know that I need to focus my energies here. But interestingly, this rainbow at the bottom is that 3 out of these 4 factors are actually not in great territory. They're good, but not great, which is selection, quality, and checkout. And if I can lift those into dark green territory, then I can dramatically improve NPS.
Absolutely right, Saiki.
Got it. And this magic page has come from a data science analysis of the responses we got from today's audience, Dipronil?
Yes, Saiki, that's right.
So by that, is it safe to say that with the right model, you can actually generate a page like this for pretty much any category out there, any company out there?
Absolutely, Saiki, yes.
Got it. So this is an important message for the audience to take away, is that don't stop at the NPS score and say, I know I have to intuitively have to improve it, so let me look for this fuzzy notion of love. Dipronil has made our lives easier by breaking down the factors that actually add up to that love. And for every company, you can have a version of this page that tells you where your relationship NPS comes from, which factors, and how you're doing on those individual factors. Is that a fair conclusion, Dipro?
Yes, Saiki, absolutely right. And we've typically seen that as well. So what we've normally seen is companies who have a very good NPS, top 2 out of their top 3 drivers are normally have a very good CSAT rating, whereas even vice versa holds true, right? So typically companies who do not have a very good NPS score, maybe the top 2 or in fact all the top 3 drivers have a very poor CSAT rating.
Got it. So just one important thing for the audience's benefit I want to underline is this is not a transactional NPS model or score at all. These scores are outside any immediate transaction that you have done. This is measuring your overall relationship with the platform. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, like Abhiraj was also mentioning. Should we move on from this page, Dipro?
So yes, Saiki.
Okay. Keep going.
Now that we've identified those improvement drivers, which was, say, selection and availability, product quality, and checkout, we wanted to, if you want to understand what are exactly the problem statements within those drivers, right? What are my actionables? Where do I focus? Voice of customer or that verbatim analysis is what helps us close the loop on that. Right. And we had a section towards the end of our survey where we were trying to understand or collect some verbatim comments from the respondents, from our participants, on understanding what is it or anything else that they would like to share, any improvement areas, any suggestions they would have on their experience with that most preferred online shopping platform. So here we've captured some of those top callouts, right? So you can clearly see that for selection and availability, what seems to be the problem statement is products are being out of stock or size availability. That's coming out as a call out or a challenge area over there. For quality, again, a lot of them are calling out the quality of the products has been poor, and it seems to be a more of a recent effect, right? So maybe they had better expectations, there was better quality which was delivered before, but now that kind of is deteriorating, and that's what they're kind of calling out over here. In terms of checkout, what they're saying is the payment experience is not very intuitive, it's not very user friendly. So that's again coming out as a key actionable area over here.
Understood. So out of the 4 factors, we saw 3 of them were in the yellow. And you're saying you can actually go one step deeper by a thematic analysis of verbatim responses, which you get in pretty significant numbers from your RNPS survey. you can actually identify actionable themes to work on to get your CSAT up. So this gets you to a pretty high level of clarity in diagnosing exactly what you need to do.
Correct. Absolutely.
Got it. Okay. Okay, let's move from now understanding this notion of key drivers that Dipro has shared with us and what issues are there in those drivers to actually improving your NPS. If you look at this page, the left-hand side is the same set of drivers that Dipro explained to us. And thanks to the weightage that we know how the CSAT improvement in the 3 yellow factors can actually drive NPS improvement. So you can actually reduce your NPS improvement to almost a perfect science of knowing how much you can improve CSAT based on the issues identified, and therefore how much NPS gains you can have as a company. So overall, measuring the relationship NPS, breaking it down into underlying drivers, and then converting the thematic statements into a tangible action plan can get you all the way to a tangible relationship NPS improvement. Okay, fantastic. This all sounds good and dandy. I improve my relationship NPS, like, so what? Boss kya nikla, right? What did I get from a business standpoint? Let's answer that question. Which is, what is the value of NPS? But before we do that, as an audience, we'd like you guys to reflect a little bit on the drivers, like Dipro has shared. For the e-commerce company, it was selection, delivery, quality, checkout. What could be the drivers for your companies? For those of you who are listening in, question to each of you is, please share this in the Zoom chat window. What's the name of your company? Which industry do you belong to? And what do you think are the top 3 CX drivers for you? Just like for this e-commerce company, it was selection, delivery, product, and checkout. What are the top 3 drivers for you? We'd love to hear from you via chat. You can just log in the chat box for your company, name the company, name the industry you're in, and what you think the top 3 CX drivers are. If you have clarity on that, great. You can start your NPS journey tomorrow. If not yet, then that's something to work on going forward. So please start logging your reflections on drivers for your business. These are examples of such drivers. So you can look at this page and literally pick 3 things. If you're a business that is similar to e-commerce or food delivery or D2C, as an X to 10X team, we have a driver view of pretty much all the major industries out there. So this is a conversation we can have later as well, if you like. But meanwhile, if each of you can log drivers out of some of these lists, maybe that you think are valuable for your business, it's a good reflection exercise to do. Okay. Now, why does all this matter? Why does all this matter? And this is the business end of the conversation. The reality is that across consumer platforms in the country, this is a fairly standard pattern. This is a real life example. Promoters retention at 85%, detractors retention at 41%. You'll see the passive retention somewhere in between. And the actual spends, even for the detractors who are retained, the spends are less than a half of what the promoter spends. As you can see on the page, 2.3x higher spends from promoters versus detractors. So overall, you safely get a 5x return to converting a detractor or a passive customer into a promoter. So that's how you square the circle, which is, if you can move your NPS points up, which means in reality, increase the proportion of customers in the promoter bucket, you will safely get 5 to 10x returns on the revenue side from each customer. And that, going back to what Abhiraj said, is pretty much the only way at scale as a consumer platform you can continue to grow and be profitable as a business in India. The thing you can do beyond even measuring value of NPS is you can get your customers to also rate their NPS on other companies that they work with or they buy from. So in this case, this company has 43%. If you look at the left-hand side, 43% of their customers don't buy on any other platform, but 57% buy on other platforms. And this is true for many consumer platforms in India. So to the 57% who buy from others, you can also ask them the same NPS questions you ask them for your own company. So you know exactly where you stand and also where your competition stands. So you can see it's interesting in the case of of this company that exclusive customers have an RNPS of 20. But as you go to non-exclusive, you find that the NPS drops to 11, 15, and even negative into -9 territory. And with two competitors, the competitors actually have a dramatically higher RNPS than you do. So again, this gives you a very clear sense of the urgency of needing to work on relationship NPS, not just for absolute improvement in your own business, but also for improvement versus competition. And this company clearly has a huge risk of losing customers to competitor B and competitor C because there the RNPS is substantially higher. Okay, so I'm going to quickly summarize what we've covered so far in the quick tips and tricks and tools around relationship NPS. And then if we have any questions, we can spend a few minutes on that. And then we'll have Abhay also join us pretty soon. So what defines a 5-on-5 customer experience system? 5 quick points. One is, don't measure just CSAT and transactional NPS, measure relationship NPS outside the transaction context. And the reality is only 20% of companies actually do this. 80% of companies purely measure transactional measures. Second important takeaway is don't stop at NPS. Go beyond NPS to look at the drivers, actually the attribution, data science attribution model that tells you which factors actually move NPS, things like selection or delivery, like we saw in the e-commerce example. What are those 3 or 4 drivers that account for 70-80% of your NPS? This requires deeper work to understand which inputs actually drive outcomes for your business. And the reality is only 10% of companies in our ecosystem do this key driver analysis today. The third important measure, and here we do better as an ecosystem, is for every driver, what is the CSAT? Not CSAT at an overall company level, but how am I doing on quality? How am I doing on price? How am I doing on delivery? Driver level CSAT measurement is the third success factor. And again, half of the companies that we know in the ecosystem don't yet do this. So very important tip for how you do your NPS measurement. The fourth is don't just stop at knowing the drivers. Quantify your NPS in terms of actual revenue opportunity. You saw the 5x chart that if you can move a detractor to promoter, some version of that is true for most consumer platforms. So quantify the value of your NPS in terms of growth. And if you don't do this, it's very hard for your teams to fight for experience. The temptation will always be to fight for more discount-led growth, which is not affordable in the long run. And then finally, you can measure NPS for your own business and do the drivers, but you can get even more value from this tool if you measure it for your competitors and as well. And the reality is, in the example we saw, more than half the customers shop across platform. Something of that will be true for you as well. So what is the relative NPS versus your competitors? So 5 simple success factors. Very quickly, relationship, not transaction NPS. Go one level deeper to drivers with the right attribution model. CSAT at a driver level, not at a company level. Converting NPS into actual revenue value. And then finally, measuring it versus competitors, not just in absolute terms for your own business. So those are the 5 factors. Now, what we'd love to quickly do is ask each of you to take a quick assessment where you quickly score yourselves on each of these 5 areas. Some of them you're doing well, some of them you have yet to start. And if we get a good number of responses, we can share the results back with you. Are we going to share a link? Is the link already shared, Dipro?
Yes, Saiki.
Okay. So guys, everyone will find a link in their chat box, which mentions here a self-assessment link. If you can please launch that assessment and quickly answer the 5 questions. It basically asks you whether you are following these 5 practices in your own company. And if you can quickly fill that assessment, we'll have the results here live to share back with you and to reflect on together as a group. So just take a minute or two to launch that self-assessment and fill it. And then we'll spend a minute or two reflecting on it and then ask our friend Abhay to join us to hear the Licious story. Dipro, you're keeping an eye on the responses?
Yes, Saiki. We've got around 30 responses. Let's just wait for another minute.
Okay. Meanwhile, we have some interesting questions and observations. Thanks for sharing, folks. I think some very interesting. Wow, that's a lot of. That's a lot of responses. I know I can't do justice to them, but let's try and answer some of this while we're waiting for the responses. How easy is it to measure relative NPS? Good question. This is from Anonymous. The reality is the report that Dipro shared was actually a report prepared based on your own responses from the audience in the last 2 days. And we found across consumer platforms, you can even do these surveys via your own channels. If you get decent proportion of response, even a few hundred responses will give you a very good answer. The only thing is you need a good attribution model. You need a good attribution model to assess your relationship NPS into key drivers. So that's where a little bit of deeper work is required. But getting the high level RNPS score is relatively easy. Just make sure you don't just send it to people who did recent transactions, but send it to all your customers who transacted with you at least over the last 6 months. That way you get a fair zoom out reflection of the relationship with your business, not just the people who are actually active and transacting today. A great question, Nikhil. For an early stage company, how do you get enough data points? If you do this survey, even if you get to 30, 40, 50 responses, you can get to fairly compelling results. And if it's even shallower than that, you will have to supplement this with deeper interviews and questions with your customers. So maybe this is a conversation, Nikhil, we can have offline. We're going to also ask some of you if you'd like to continue the conversation on today's topic. We'll find a way to reach out to you individually. But you can pretty much do this even at early stage scale, very, very applicable. NPS points for healthcare. Yes, we've done a lot of work in the health tech space. So we actually have NPS, generic NPS reports on healthcare. So yes, available. Again, if you log it in your feedback form at the end of today's session, we will come back to you with some good insights on that. Okay, do we have results on the assessment that we can share?
Yes, Saiki, we've got 50% responses.
Lovely. Can you put it on the screen, please?
Yes.
Do I need to stop sharing?
I think the screen is visible.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So, guys, this is the scores that you have filled as a group. And don't worry about the low score. This is the reality. Even you heard Abhiraj saying we still have a long way to go, despite the obsession with CX from day one. This is the reality for all of us as an ecosystem. And a fairly typical score. We're 2.2 out of 6 in terms of these practices that we follow. So the red bars actually show where the answer is no. So red and yellow, most of us are not doing RNPS. KDA, a little bit better. 25% of people today are doing some version of key driver analysis. This whole relative NPS piece is clearly a huge opportunity. And very interestingly, linking the NPS to actual retention improvement, which is the last column, also seems to be a huge opportunity. So I think probably safe to summarize, looking at your own scores as a group, that this is a topic that has tremendous potential. And if you go back to what Abhiraj shared, which is eventually the game for everyone is to go from 50-50 to 80-20, which means retained customers is the whole game in India, then clearly a topic worth a little bit more time and effort from us in the Indian startup ecosystem. So this is a place where we will pause this part of the conversation around some tools and techniques. Now, if you guys are interested in going deeper on RNPS, when we float the feedback form at the end of today's session, just feel free to log in that feedback form. If you'd like X210X team to reach out, we'll do your self-assessment for you. Don't worry, it's free. As X210X, we're here to serve the ecosystem. So if it is helpful, the concept of RNPS and a quick assessment for your company, we're very happy to reach out and get your journey started. So have no fear. This is a completely free offer from us, but just log in the feedback form that you'd like our team to get in touch with you, and we'll find a way to talk to you and take the conversation forward and hopefully go much deeper in your company's context on the whole RNPS piece. But on that note, without further ado, I see my friend Abhay is now with us. Abhay, are you there?
Hi, Saiki. Yeah, I also have the same background as yours.
Correct. Lovely. Abhay, so we've been having a very interesting conversation. We started with Abhiraj on him explaining the UC context and how, frankly, from their standpoint, experience equal to growth. It's as simple as that. I know this has been for you. It's a topic of obsession from day one. So I'd love to start there. Abhay, can you talk to us a little bit about what has been your journey on customer experience, and from the early days of Licious, share a little bit with us on what the journey has looked like on this whole topic of experience and retention.
So first of all, thank you, Saiki. Thank you for having me here. Very happy to be amongst 200 people, 191. Wow. And I also saw some familiar names there. Saiki. So I saw Aman Tekriwal, I saw Surbhi, our own Surbhi, I saw Vikas Mandavewala. So these folks, in some or the other way, we've known.
Are they Licians, Abhay?
Vikas is vegetarian. Aman becomes a meat eater after a few drinks, and Surbhi, you should know. I don't think Surbhi is a meat eater.
I thought they're Licians. They're thoda yehi chance hai. Chalo, let's go and ask Abhay some questions on this conference. Anyway, sorry, go on.
All right. I don't know if there was one moment really, but for us, I think for both me and Vivek, I think that the bedrock of Licious and the way it was born, visualized, conceptualized, and eventually the way it came about, it was deeply only sort of obsessed about what's the most superlative way of bringing that joy and delight in the life of the consumer. So for a category which had forever otherwise existed in the offline realm, and back then, Saiki, we didn't know, what D2C, etc. meant, right? So we just started off. But we realized that there was no other way of truly delighting the consumer unless, one crazy brand somehow decided that, we will do everything that needs to be done, from building a supply chain to, rearing your own chicken, to putting up your processing centers, to building cold chain where there was none, to building an app and a tech company as well. Just so that, the moment, she opened that pack of Licious and started, cooking with it, to her, it felt like playing with it, So I think genetically, Licious was wired always in the product truth, which is so fundamentally experiential when it comes to our category. Allows you to express yourself in such a deep and fun way. And we realize that, as a brand, whatever we do, we must find a way of elevating the current experience. So I think from very early days, Saiki, this meant that, we have to, while the problem, okay, so the challenge was exciting, the problem was omnipresent, and the solution was complicated, but, the articulation of the solution to one, A, the, internally inside the organization, and B, externally, to the consumer had to be absolutely simple. So, when we started off, we said that how do we make this idea of product obsession, quality obsession, meaningful for the organization? And we said, yeah, we will never sell what we will not feed our own family and children. That was like the simple one-line message. So even the meat technician who was working on that meat knew that that's the responsibility. The job is not cutting that chicken. The packer's job was not packing, right? So I think from early days that became sort of central, and then we walked the talk on it, Saiki. I think what becomes important, at least for consumer companies, is not just having a fancy sort of mission statement and saying we're the most product obsessed company, etc., but also bringing it to life, in the hardest times, and I think if an organization has the correct courage and conviction to take hard decisions in its, early on in its life, then I think that value becomes real.
Yes.
People get inspired for the real reasons, and of course there have been many examples of that. If you want, I can enumerate.
And this one, Abhay, is very interesting because that product obsession means some hard choices. Means you can't by default sell the product cheaper. At some level, there's an e-commerce habit in India कि online तो cheaper ही मिलेगा, offer मिलेगा, ये मिलेगा, वो मिलेगा. But the investing in that quality also means that in many cases your products have to be sold at a premium to what's available in the offline market. So can you talk to us a little bit about some of these hard choices that you've made along the way? And because it's very easy to write mission statements, as you said, but have there been tough decisions you've been forced to make based on this?
Yeah, 100%, Saiki. I remember this was when we launched Delhi, and these are the days 2015, 16. Food tech was a bad word. Companies were dying left, right, and center. VCs were, pumping money on this side, and companies were just boom, dying out, with rocket velocity, and some of them were taking off. And nobody was funding the meat sector, because people said, "Ki yaar, tum log pagal ho, kya kar rahe ho? Are you building a tech company? Are you building a product company? Are you building a logistics company? Are you building a cold chain company? Are you building a, sourcing company?" So,
answer is yes, all of the above.
So all of the above, and they were like, "Where is it in China? Show us this in America." And, yeah, it's a very India problem. Hey, aisa kya India? There's no India problem. Indian consumer, what Indian consumer only creates about value. See, that was the narrative, right? And chicken is a chicken. What can you do to a chicken? So
chicken to aloo hai.
Aloo hai. So Licious had the courage to imagine that this is not true, right? Because when we spoke to the consumers, we realized that an entire industry had passed on its own baggage to the consumer, and somehow that became the language, right? So I remember, Saiki, me and Vivek, when we first early on went into even the market, to some of the large integrators, and I remember, one of them got me and Vivek a cup of tea, and after listening to this fancy spiel, he said, "Beta, chai piyo aur ghar jao." I said, "Uncle," he's a very, very senior gentleman. I said, "Why?" He's like, "Beta, aapki company to shuru hone se pehle hi mar gayi." So that's what he said. You're born with a stillborn child. I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "What you want is gold-plated meat. The cost of production of this chicken that you want is much higher than the cost at which it is selling in the markets today. So if I were to even take the effort of producing it for you, you can never sell it. There is no consumer for this." That was the starting baggage, that two people in Bangalore want gold-plated meat. And we said, "Okay, give it to us. That's our problem." Break through that baggage to say that, hey, there is a consumer for this quality, right? It was a big move back then, right? And those are the days, somebody told us that ye to Taj ko bhi nahi chahiye. Even Oberoi doesn't want it. Flight kitchens don't want it. Why do you want it, right? And Saiki, today, 5, 6, 7 years out, flight kitchens are saying, no, we don't want Licious. Oberoi is saying, no, we want Licious minus. So what happened? Licious became the benchmark. How? Because the consumer knew it. Consumer wanted it. It is just that nobody had serviced it. The other example is Delhi, Saiki, when we launched, and I still remember day one of launch, and I am sitting in, Delhi, and Vivek is sitting here in Bangalore, and we are doing this, first page Gurgaon Times ad. Licious is coming to Gurgaon, and we are all trembling because they are a piddly Bangalore company. People said, "You got lucky, some tech guys bought you because of convenience. You cannot survive Delhi. Delhi knows everything about, meat."
Correct.
We were so scared. First day, front page ad of Gurgaon Times. Those days, 13 lakh rupees, Saiki. How we spending, only I know.
Correct.
One night before, that 2 tons of chicken comes for the morning, dispatch, and our SOP said 0 to 4 degrees. That that vehicle came at 6 degrees, right? And our quality guy, Sujit, I still remember, he rejected the entire lot And sitting here, Vivek just went crazy. Like, what the hell? How can you reject the whole thing? And everybody started fighting with us, including the vendor, saying, what is this, sir? 6 degrees, put it in your own cold chain, it will become 4 degrees. That day, Saiki, we had the conviction of saying no to 2,000 orders on chicken, because we realized that if I am not able to enforce the 0 to 4 degree discipline today, I'll never be able to enforce it. So people said, क्या फर्क पड़ता है 1 degree temperature से? But I think 19-20 में जो इंडिया में ना most people lose it. The conviction to push through that 19-20 का gap and say no, yaar, character of an organization is what you do and nobody looks at you, right? And that was the only day, Saiki, that me and Vivek ever thought about on this topic ever, because from that day it was clear to the organization. We lost sales, we got hammered, our CHC got hammered, people called, yaar, ad kyun dete ho jab product nahi hota, and so on and so forth. But why did we do it? We didn't do it because we said, yaar, this is foundational. We will never sell what we will not feed our own children. So I think simple things like these, you have to do, to inspire an organization to believe in your mission. And once people believe in it, Saiki, magic happens. At least that's what I have learned at Licious.
Yeah, ये तो पहली story में you caused goosebumps, Abhay, but this was, I mean, full page ad and then to go out of stock is to some it may look like courage. In hindsight, at that point must have felt like suicide.
I showed you some examples just 1 hour ago also, no, Saiki. So
yeah. So courage. At least there's no shortage of courage. Abhay, any other stories that come to mind that sort of reinforce this whole?
Yeah. So I can tell you a latest story, hot off the pen story. This is just 1 month ago, Saiki. Me and Supriya, we went to Krabi, for a vacation. And when we were changing our aircraft at Krabi, Supriya is my wife. So she saw Sachin Tendulkar at the baggage belt. I didn't. And those people whisked him away, literally, right? So I mean, I didn't see him. So I was sitting in the last seat on that whatever, Krabi aircraft, and Supriya said, hey, Sachin is sitting in the front. Then who's Sachin? Sachin Tendulkar. I said, wow. So it's like, yeah, it will be so much fun if I can get a picture with him. I said, do you want me to go talk to him? She's like, yeah, like he'll talk to you. I said, let me try. So I go from the last row right to where business classes, and I open the curtain and Sachin Tendulkar is sitting there, with his iPad playing Candy Crush. So I'm like, hello, sir, can I talk to you for 2 minutes? And he's playing Candy Crush, he's getting irritated. Like, what? And then the
fanboy kahan se aa gaya?
Kaun hai bhai tu? So then the air hostess comes, sir, please go back to your seat.
पर्दे के पीछे वापस चले
जाओ तुम, कहाँ से आ गए तुम, आम आदमी? So I said, Sachin, just 1 minute. I'm a startup founder in Bangalore. I'm a big fan of yours. I just have a small request. मेरा request क्या था कि सुप्रिया को photo खिंचवाना है. So, what startup? I'm like, sir, Licious. Huh? Licious? We immediately closed his iPad, Candy Crush rakha, and he told the air hostess, please go. Sachin is sitting alone, okay? Anjali is also sitting behind, 2 seats empty. Come, sit next to me. And Saiki, for the next 15 minutes, God was sitting next to me like child. And he was just going crazy. Oh my God, your prawns, your seawater prawns. Anjali just loves them. Sarah, oh, she loves your chicken. Oh, I'm a Maharashtrian. This is my dish. You see this picture. I was cooking in my kitchen. And boss, I am not able to believe it only. ये भगवान मेरे साथ बैठा और ऐसा बच्चा सा बन गया. और 15 मिनट तक साइकी एयर होस्टेस आल्सो केप्ट, 2 बार आई, जाओ वापस जाओ, हो गया ऑटोग्राफ. एंड ही केप्ट सेंडिंग करके तुम जाओ. एंड बॉस, सो आई सेड ओके, मतलब 15 मिनट का मैंने बोला सचिन को, सचिन ओके, आई एम वेरी प्रिविलेज, ऑफ कोर्स मैंने फोटो भी हाथ ऐसे मेरे काम पर थे, मैंने एक सेल्फी खींचा. मैंने कहा बॉस, मैं आपके पास किसी और काम से आया था, मेरी बीवी पीछे बैठी है, उसको ना आपके साथ फोटो खिंचाने का है. यहाँ क्यों नहीं फोटो खींचेंगे, तो जब फ्लाइट रुकेगा तो खींच लेना. तो मैं थैंक यू बोल के थरथराते हाथों से आई जस्ट वेंट बैक. एंड सुप्रिया said, Bhagat, where did you go? Like, Sachin caught me and he kept held on to me and I told her this. क्या बकवास है, तुमने फोटो खिंचवा लिया, मेरा नहीं खिंचाया. And she was just shouting at me. And then the flight landed, business class got off. हम बेचारे लास्ट सीट वाले, जब तक हम पहुंचे, सुप्रिया was giving me गाली, तेरी वजह से तेरा फोटो आ गया, सचिन ने फोटो नहीं खिंचाया, तुम ऐसे ही हो, you are mean, selfish. And I'm going to the baggage belt. And then one woman calls me, hello, are you the Licious boy? And then, I see Anjali Tendulkar. She's calling me. She said, come here, Sachin has been waiting for you for such a long time. Where have you been? Bechara Sachin Tendulkar mask laga ke khada hua hai. And I'm like shocked. Like, he said that your wife wants to take a picture with you. And I called Supriya. Supriya कहाँ है bathroom में? मैं उसको जल्दी से बोला. मैंने कहा Sachin wait कर रहा है, जल्दी आओ. So Supriya comes, then we take a picture, and then Anjali starts telling Supriya and Zuzu, my 4-year-old, you know how you should let daughters be, and you know food, and again another 15 minutes we're talking about prawns, crabs, whatever. Then finally he says goodbye, takes my number and he goes. But the big point is what, Psyche? The moment I said the word licious, God himself, you know, was so enamored. I mean, Sachin is God, right? For all of India. To drop all his everything, and that he was a consumer in that moment. And he was that consumer because of what the brand had made him feel. And finally, Psyche's parting words were, can I please put money in Licious? I said, boss, it is at 1.8 billion valuation. And he said, I want to put money in Licious. So, how did it happen, Psyche? Because we imagined that this is the possibility. That prawn is not prawn here. If you put your life into it, it can become magical. And then this was this whole family going crazy with Licious. So, I think that's the magic of building a brand with love. That, you know, that love, then it just doesn't stay with you. Like it almost becomes like, you know, everybody else's. And in that moment, I was humbled, grateful, everything. I mean, I don't know how to describe that experience.
So some of this, Abhay, you're sharing, I mean, and it's very obvious from the way you speak about it. And obviously we are good friends. So I know this, that this is at some level, some of this is not a matter of logic and business rationale. This started off as pagalpan. Like that guy giving you feedback ki jo tera cost hai wo boss, people will never even buy at that cost, forget about with a markup. So the birth was an act of madness. I think maybe a safe statement to make. But talk to us a little bit about, as you have now been on the journey over the past few years, why does it matter? As the business has grown over time, why does this issue of great product, great experience, retention, why does it matter so much to you guys? We heard Abhiraj's answer to this question. Would love to get your perspective.
I think it's existential to Licious. I think two things are existential to Licious. One, that it has no other... See, if it has to create a delightful product, which is distinctly superior, Licious has to find a way to put life into, you know, a dead animal, literally. You know, so what is otherwise seen as inanimate, Licious has to really foundationally change the quality. To change the quality, Psyche, you know, we need to invest in the supply chain. Unless the farmer is incentivized with 10 rupees more to produce a better quality product, you know, that raw material will make all the difference in the finished good, right? So, and if the consumer is not willing to pay that 10, 15 rupees extra, the farmer will never get this value. So in some sense, it's a virtuous cycle. Correct. Therefore, it is the Licious responsibility to ensure that, you know, the category premiumizes, so the industry shifts, right? Secondly, Psyche, this is a business of repeat. You know, the Licious franchise is a franchise of fans, you know, from... You know, Aman is on this call and he'll remember, and you know, this metric is even true today.
Franchise of fans.
It is, right? Because it's owned by fans, I believe, because they run the business, Psyche. So to this date, 80% of our, you know, 85% of our monthly transactions, you know, come from our repeat users. And in that also the power users, you know, power almost 65% of the platform level revenue. So what we know, Psyche, is that this is not a game of spray and pray. Spread yourself into 50,000 pin codes, distribute. You know, massive TAM, India में billions में कोई भी story लिखो, Psyche वो multi-billion हो जाती है. I think here the story is going deeper in the stomach and going deeper in the heart. And I think if you have to grow deeper in the heart, I think that is the line of attack to deeper in the stomach. So they say, na, man, the way to every man's heart is through stomach. In our case, you know, it's also the reverse is also true. And I think this is where the idea...
This is again, it is a matter of existential reality that, as you put it, Abhay, this is a business of repeat.
Absolutely.
ऐसा कुछ नहीं है that someone can come buy from you and then not buy again. That means there's no business. So for you also, repeat is the measure by which, that is your litmus test for, am I building a real business?
Absolutely. And in repeat now, you know that, you know, the quality of work that we are doing is, you know, how do we improve the quality of these repeating cohorts also, right? So, I mean, we are trying to further embellish the repeat, not leaving it at the definition of transaction. Right? So one way of looking at repeat is transaction. The other is, you know, involvement, right? So Licious is changing gears from transaction to involvement, right?
I'm going to double click on that word in just a second, Abhay, but just a quick a shout out to the audience that if you'd like to ask Abhay some of your questions, please start logging them on the Q&A channel, and we'll try to save a few minutes to get Abhay's thoughts on your questions. But say a little bit more about this. It's not a game of transactions, it's a game of involvement or relationship. What does that really mean, Abhay? I mean, beyond the words.
One simple data point, for example, for the group is that what we observed, folks, is that now first mathematics, that both the product rating and the absolute retention for the cohort of consumers who tried any of our non-standard SKUs, non-curry cut SKUs, was higher by more than 1,000, bits. I mean, that is the order of magnitude of difference. And, product rating was also, I think the difference was between 4.4 and 4.7. The platform, category to category retention was also psyche. We went from 60% to all the way to 87%, right? So what we realized is that as consumers interact with those aspects and those selections of Licious, which allowed them to explore the cook in them, deeper, instead of getting served by the cook of the house. So it was the bai and the maid of the house which were making the most staple chicken curry every day with the chicken curry cut. But the moment you had the biryani tangadi cut, you were making fantastic dishes with which, you were really playing in the meat world. So what we realized is that there is an interesting opportunity within the selection itself to create a greater degree of affinity, within the loyal consumer cohorts, and the role of selection, therefore, changed significantly, right? And the way we are now, looking at even the constructs on the loyalty engine that we are trying to build, no longer. So the mistake that we are not wanting to make on that is that, loyalty cannot be bought. I cannot buy your loyalty by telling you, pay me 100 rupees and I will give you the benefits of being, loyal to me. I think that journey also, and again, Psyche, that it's extremely immersive from all the benefits are inside products, that you will get access to special cuts. You will get access to, participating in the Licious Masterclass. You will become on the Licious Gastronom panel. You can feature on the Licious pack and become the Licious, brand ambassador. You can get access to certain SKUs, which will be launched first. So everything here is built around the idea of going deeper and deeper and deeper in the world of Licious.
Got it. That's your journey. You've revealed given us some insight into the journey yet to come, Abhay. That's always fascinating. You've also dropped some clues about the math of it, and ultimately there is a science also behind all this. Can you talk a little bit about also how you're starting to push yourself with this whole measurement of relationship NPS and what clues it is giving you and the team?
Oh yeah. So very interesting. Earlier we used to just have one line question: are you likely to recommend Licious to your friends and family? And then we used to be very happy, Psyche, that at that time we had some 60 plus NPS, and we were like, wow, everybody loves Licious.
Oh yeah, come.
Everybody still loves Licious, but I think this is drinking your own Kool-Aid. It can be a good vanity metric that you can, keep patting yourself on the back with, and, it can be good to show to investors. But I think the reality, at least as founders and business builders and top leaders in the organization, is that I think you have to be critical, and I think you have to ask the right question. So I think after we implemented the RNPS track, what we realized, very clearly is, as we cut the data, now differently, we realize that there are certain dimensions of the relationship between the platform and the consumer, which were, clearly getting overlooked in the broad-based NPS track. For example, what does 4.5? See, for example, on a 5 scale, you can be very happy that, one of your categories is operating at 4.5. But I think the victim of 4.5 is the 0.5. In fact, the 1 and 2 raters, who actually get unnoticed because, you think, 90% kind of score is a fabulous score. But I think RNPS allowed us, because what was happening is we were saying, NPS is great, SLA is great. So why is repeat not moving? It's only that when we saw the RNPS results, we got, qualitative insights. For example, one insight that we got, and we were doing death by metric also, right? So our availability definition was flawed. What we were calling availability, Psyche, and you remember that every half an hour ping on one SKU was availability, and we were looking at some metric which was showing a very high availability. But when we heard from consumers that look, apart from certain SKUs, I'm never able to find these products which are important for me. And we change the definition of availability itself, and then we change the whole supply chain to service that definition of availability.
So that's a profound change in the business based on.
Of course, we moved to express weighted. So the folks who are on the call, let me explain the metric to you, maybe so you will understand. So
30 seconds, Abhay, because there are a lot of questions that are now piled up waiting for you. So I want to ask a few of them as well.
Yeah, so it was simple. Yeah. We used to think, for example, Sunday availability we would see is 95% or 90%, and what we would not overlay on top of this was traffic weight. Like if the demand on Sunday was totally skewed between 7 to 11, there was no point having availability after 1 o'clock in the afternoon when the cooking moment is gone. And we used to think our system was telling ping, 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 available. But what we were not reading is that meaning of availability is sharply meaningful for consumers only in this slot. So this was death by metric. We were looking at the wrong metric. Then we changed the metric. We said the real metric is available at the right time slot. Then we realized, okay, again, even though we made product available, there was another fault that we found, again, iteratively, that what is the point of having between 7 to 11, product dikh raha hai aapko, but delivery time I'm showing in the 11 to 1 o'clock slot. I'm not delivering it to you in 90 minutes. So then we overlaid the express promise also on time. So that became the right metric.
Got it.
Express uptime metric. And Saiki, we moved that from 75% to now 90% plus. And the difference that it has made on that, first cohort, and we were speaking to Abhiraj, earlier, that, 01 to 05, and again, that's a different discussion. There's an absolute 10%
improvement.
Improvement in that in the repeat for those consumers.
So again, you have decoded the RNPS pointing at availability and then going to the operating driver under it is sort of unlocking a whole transformation journey. Abhay, that's great. I know there's a lot more where that came from, but we'll ask a couple of questions that our audience has logged with us. There's a question from Pratima, Abhay, saying, when you scaled up the business, how did you ensure that your product and services quality was as fabulous as during the initial days? Initial days, it's easy to be that obsessed, but how did you sort of keep that going as you got bigger?
So very simple here. I think, actually, I am saying it's very simple. It's not. It's the foundations of the organization. I think it's the, like in any house, the plumbing and the wiring and the electrical will decide, how fancy and beautiful that house, can actually become with all the artifacts. I think for us, we did things that we thought were important when nobody was doing those things. So for example, Licious installed the world's highest food safety system, which at that point in time in India was available at Nestle, Unilever, ITC, and Coca-Cola only, FSSC 22000, when we were a 3-year-old company. And our first wave of real growth came when pandemic struck, Saiki, right? When everybody ran helter-skelter for supplies. And in fact, you would remember that there was the chicken market, prices fell to 20 rupees a chicken because people thought COVID is happening because of eating chicken.
Correct.
And the whole market dropped prices, Saiki. You know what we did? We increased prices. Because we knew that our chicken is untouched by any of these vagaries because our supply chain was solid, it was bulletproof. And consumers drove in by hordes to say, we want Licious. So I think all that foundational work that Licious had done came to its rescue at the moment that it mattered.
Got it.
Right? So having the right processes in advance helps us, to ensure that we don't lose track of this.
Got it.
Simple answer to your question.
One more related question. I'm going to ask you one more, Abhay. Maybe we'll take a minute or two more. But to everyone, to the audience, one quick request is before you log out, even as we're speaking, please fill the feedback form and also log in the form if you want to continue the conversation in the context of your company. What the whole relationship NPS conversation we've talked about today with Abhiraj, Abhay, and that we shared some tips on. Please log that in the feedback form. Please start filling it as we speak and before you log out. Abhay, one more question I'm going to ask you. Quite a few folks have asked some version of this question, which is the nature of the team. So what is the org behind now getting this level of what is the definition of quality? How is it followed? Can you give us some clues in terms of what is inside the tent on how the team is organized and who does what and how does the process get lined up end to end?
Are you talking just about the supply chain side, Saiki?
No, I mean, everything from like R&D, sourcing, quality. I mean, just some glimpses into what team adds up to quality for the customer.
Sure. So, what folks, we were very clear, but the fact that we are a product company that is building a platform and a service, so the best product experience can reach the consumer. So I think we over-engineered all our efforts into ensuring that that there is differentiation and magic in the Licious packet. So I think a bunch of tech work on the app, shopfront, UX, and so on and so forth, we sort of did it in the second half of our life. The first half of our life was all about getting the product perfect. So there, I mean, on that side, we have a supply chain team which has the sourcing vertical. The sourcing vertical comprises of transactional sourcing and strategic sourcing. Strategic sourcing is the one that goes deep and vertically integrates and changes the quality of the produce itself, where we are farmers ourselves. And we work with a bunch of farmers, and we give them the best in class advice on nutraceuticals, farming techniques, breeding techniques, animal husbandry techniques. So we elevate the quality of the produce itself.
Got it.
And it's followed by an entire processing network, which is like a manufacturing network. Now this is again FSSC 22000, ISO 45001, SHA 8001, one of the
Got it.
world founded. But then this is a extremely tight run ship run by meat technicians, food technicians, food scientists, veterinarians. And this team has a quality assurance team that keeps both of these and the last mile, which is the delivery network honest. So the quality assurance team does not report into the operations in Licious. So the quality assurance team reports to the founders.
Got it.
And that's the team psyche that ensures that we keep implementing a more and more stringent sort of system. Always we put in place a 3-year ahead system, and we constantly disrupt our own selves, on that journey.
So there's a significant infrastructure all the way from farm to processing to supply chain, last mile, that actually gives you assurance even at the scale. Thanks very much for that.
600 plus farms, Psyche, 600 plus farms.
Wow.
We run ourselves.
Again, I think in 30 minutes, you've given us a glimpse into a whole different life story. Abhay, when you tell a Sachin Tendulkar story, it's a little bit hard to remember anything else in the summary. But I'm going to try all the way from ye kya pagalpan hai, you guys are trying to do gold-plated meat, some crazy boys from Bangalore, to cancelling a Delhi launch after a front page ad, to creating an infrastructure and team that kind of shares this insanity for quality. I think this is, and to a existential belief, there's both a math to it today, but there's also an existential belief that, boss, without a superior quality, there is no company. And that better be reflected in the customer metrics, to now finally using Relationship NPS as a way of saying, it's not just a transaction. I better be thinking about our customers now becoming Licians. I think you've shared a wealth of insight with us, Abhay. I have the privilege of continuing the conversation with you, but at least on behalf of the audience, let me thank you for the half an hour you spent with us.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
All the best. Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
And to everyone who's, before you log off, please fill the form, and we'll hopefully see you and talk to many of you soon.